So for this last session that starts, it's my pleasure to introduce Anna. Anna is the CEO of Open Data Labs, but most importantly, she is also the creator of Vana. And Vana is this wonderful organization that is setting up all these data DAOs that enable people to take ownership of their data, no matter what platform it might be. It might be in LinkedIn, Tesla, you name it. It allows people to take their data. And we've been working with Vana since an announcement in March to investigate how we can build a foundation model called Collective One. And once Collective One is fully up and running, once we're able to onboard those sort of million-plus users that's part of the Vana network, this will in fact be the very first foundation model built by users, for users, where they are fully, opting into their process. And to be a wonderful milestone for the decentralized AI community. So that is a wonderful way to introduce Anna, and I'm sure she's going to tell us some incredible things today. I always learn something right here in a talk, so over to her. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay.
Hey everyone, great to meet you. I'm Anna, CEO of Open Data Labs, which is the research and development company behind Vana. Maybe just quick kind of background on me. So I got interested in decentralization through an interest in central banks, where I was obsessed with central banks. I had a picture of Janet Yellen in my high school bedroom. I worked at the Fed in high school. And then I got to MIT and I learned about decentralized currencies. I started mining ETH in 2015 and was wow, you can kind of use decentralized systems to create something that usually only one centralized entity could do with just a large group of people. And then I got interested in machine learning. I was training models at CSAIL, which is MIT's AI lab. And I kept wanting to train on data sets that I couldn't get access to because they were typically in kind of the walled gardens of different big companies. So zooming out a lot kind of about current state of AI and why decentralized AI matters. AI is really becoming this new source of truth and economic power. There was an example a few years ago with Google Bard, where if you asked it for a historically accurate depiction of a medieval British king, it would show you an Indian woman or a black man. And I think a lot of people were oh, this is just this crazy wokeness of the 2020s. But if there weren't another source of truth, people would just start believing this, right? And so whoever is deciding kind of what goes into AI is basically deciding this truth in an AI native world. And then the other thing is economic power, right? All of kind of the centralized AI labs, if you train the best model, you can do billions, if not tens of billions in revenue, right? That is a huge point of kind of economic concentration. Ultimately, AI models are only as good as their training data. I think it's harder to know exactly what the latest models are trained on because it's never really shared, but this is the training data for GPT-3, which is pretty representative of what's going into the models, and it's mostly public data, right? So Common Crawl is basically just take kind of the whole internet, everything that's publicly scrapable, and then everything that's kind of behind the walled garden generally isn't included in training foundation models. I saw Daniel had a graph that kind of looked like this earlier today, but really kind of visualizing the fact that the data we train on today, which is this public internet data, is so small. It's it's hard to estimate because you can't actually measure all of the internet data because it's behind the walled gardens, but the estimates are between 0.1% and 4%, right? So really small relative to everything that's actually on the internet. And if you think about this from the perspective of you as a user, probably most of what you do on the internet is not publicly available, right? You're kind of in Google Docs, you're on a platform, you're sending emails. That's not really included in training AI today. Another sort of third giant pool of data to think about is actually just all the information that could be captured in the world, right? So we can think about public data, which is what we train on today, and then all internet data, which kind of exists but is generally not included in AI training. And then you have this much larger set of data, which is some data that's not even recorded today, right? Future audio recordings, real-world video data for different kind of robotics applications, and all of that might not even be digitally recorded, but could be used to train AI in the future. These are kind of the data sets to maybe keep in mind in terms of scale. One of the things that we're running into is that just using public data isn't enough data to train really good AI, right? So if you look at FineWeb, which is just a kind of higher quality version of Common Crawl, it's around 15 trillion tokens. We basically used all of it, right? So to train the best models, it's around 15 trillion tokens, and that's kind of everything, right? So the question is, where do we get more data? I'll note too that this data wall, I think, is both an issue of quality and quantity. And I think there are some cool approaches like DeepSeek. They kind of overcame the data wall through quality, where they're training on really high quality information from like PhD students. I think their founder themselves was like literally labeling and generating high quality reasoning data. And then they scale that up and kind of make it more high quality. You have the example of Anthropic going after a lot of books to be able to train better AI models. Mercor is hiring a lot of PhD students to generate this really high quality data. But really this question is, where do you get a huge amount of high quality data and at very large scale? Companies have generally realized that their data is valuable, right? Because of kind of what's going on. And the economically rational thing for them to do is then to make it harder for everybody else to access it, right? So then they can charge as much as possible. So you have cases of these different platforms kind of selling data, buying data for really quite large sums. Something that I think most people don't realize when you think about data today is that you legally own all of your data, right? So in the same way that when you park your car in a parking lot, the parking lot doesn't own your car, right? They can't tell you, we're not going to give you your car back. It's just sitting there. That's actually the same thing for your data. You do check the terms of service box, which says that the platform can use your data to operate it, et cetera. But you can always go and get a copy back, right? And so this is true for everything from Tesla data to Instagram data to like 23andMe. If you have any sort of like smart home assistant, like if you have an Alexa, you can actually get an export that has every single voice recording you've ever said to it, which can be kind of a creepy experience, but that is like legally entirely yours. Data regulation is getting better and better to let you get this data. It can be inconvenient to get it, right? So the best data regulation is actually in Utah right now. They passed something called the Digital Choice Act, where you can have API access to all of your data. And then you have GDPR and CCPA that basically make sure you can always go get a copy of your data. One fun thing I recommend is exporting your Instagram data if you live in California, because you'll get not just your generated data that you kind of posted, but also the AI labels that they generated of you. And one label they had generated of me was stressed but not depressed. And it's just like, it actually is like a list of 300 things, and you're like, interesting. But yeah, fundamentally what Vana does is it unlocks data from walled gardens, and it puts it in users' control, right? So users basically go to different platforms, take their data out of these walled gardens, take it under their control, and then do what they want with it. In terms of kind of what's possible with this user-owned data, one of the main applications on the network are these data collectives. If you're coming from more of a crypto-native background, you might have heard this term as like a data DAO. Actually, to get a sense, who is coming from, at least, who is like, has a crypto wallet set up? Oh, cool, okay. I actually took some of the crypto stuff out, but I'll maybe add a little bit back. Yeah, data collectives, basically data DAO, group of people who control the kind of a data pool. The reason why this is important is like, say I took my data on my own, it's not very useful for AI training, right? It's only useful if a large group of people have actually collectively pooled a data set, but that's hard to do. Like imagine all of us, we all take like our credit card statements, we all put them together. One person could pretend to be a lot of people and try to take over control of that data set. And so a lot of the features of Vana are around kind of ensuring security of the data set and kind of validating the quality as the data comes in. And then once the data is kind of pooled, you're actually able to collectively make decisions over the data set. So this was a recent decision by the Spotify data DAO, which is called Unwrap, where they voted, very non-controversial, right? 99.5% of people approved it, to sell their data to grant access to an AI company to be able to access that data. This is interesting because Spotify never lets people access this data. And so it was really hard for that music AI company to get access and kind of provided this unique opportunity for users to pool their data. The second kind of category of applications, which are kind of built on top of the data collectives, is basically being able to use data as a financial asset, right? So as you kind of have this tokenized data pool, you then have shares of ownership of it. So you can use data as collateral for loans, you can basically monetize the data without selling ownership, and you have data really treated as like a tradable, dynamically priced asset. There's some more like academic research that we're doing out of Open Data Labs related to kind of this new field of data economics, right? How do you price data? What does it even look like in the AI supply chain in terms of data going in? And this is led by researcher Hamida out of McGill. If you're interested in collaborating on any of this, I can connect you to her as well. Then once you have all the data, you can train different AI models on it, right? And so I'll actually pull up some data so you guys can see kind of the structure and what's going on. So this is a data DAO that launched recently focused on credit card data. And what you can see is all of the data, it's a little bit small here. So basically people are uploading their statements. This is kind of showing you the structure. And then you have all this other data, which is included within it. And because it's structured in this way, you can grant very granular access to the data, right? So you can say, you're able to access these fields, but not others. And then you can also specify the operations that somebody's allowed to run on top of the data. And then to talk a little bit too about Collective One, which is the first user-owned foundation model. So what we're doing is we're training a 7 billion parameter model with data from all across the different data DAOs, right? And so how this works is that users contribute data to these different data DAOs on Vana. So that's for all the different platforms, LinkedIn, Sleep data, Reddit data. And then the data remains in these secure compute environments that are controlled by the DAOs, right? So they need to grant access to say, I'm okay with my data being used for Collective One. Then the model training happens using Flower's Federated Learning framework, which runs inside of the Vana secure compute environment. And this process scales to millions of contributing users, right? I think that it's sort of really easy to say, ideologically, one wants decentralized AI, right? Or one wants AI to be controlled by many. But the really tactical question to answer is, how do you make it so that AI that is created by many people is better than the AI that's created by one centralized lab, right? And I think this really is the path. We've kind of benchmarked it where we think we need around 100 million users who contributed data. So that is a massive undertaking. We're like around 1% of the way there. But it really creates this path where if you have enough people who contribute their data and train a better model, you can have a data set that no single AI lab has, and you're actually able to create much, much better AI. Some of the learnings I thought that would be interesting kind of in the field of what we've seen, just to kind of show how different open source projects can influence each other. In this case, it's like, what has Collective One done to kind of help shape the Vana roadmap? What we've seen is that having like reusable pre-processing is really important. So for example, the messaging data DAO, they had data in a bunch of different languages, a bunch of different emojis, et cetera. And so because the first version just has English data, we introduced this like transformations concept where a data DAO can essentially have a derivative of their data set that's already clean, or it's some subset of it that's kind of there and readily available. And then the other thing is that coordination across a bunch of different data DAOs is really significant overhead, right? So our team is about 25 people, and then people who build data DAOs on Vana are around 50 people, right? And so the act of going to every single data DAO that has text data and saying, hey, can you contribute to Collective One? Here are the transactions you need to approve. And then they send that to their contributors is a huge undertaking. And so we've introduced this kind of pre-authorized rules for data DAOs where they can basically say, this is how I'm comfortable with my data being used. So then you can kind of run a process like this much faster. And then last, I wanted to talk a little bit about data portability. So a lot of what people know Vana for today is the ability to pool data to be able to use it in a group of people to train AI models. But when you connect data to the network, you're actually connecting it to your individual wallet, right? So your data, your Spotify data, your Instagram data, it's connected to you. And you're also able to just kind of use that across different applications. So one example is kind of you could take your ChatGPT memory, which usually would be locked inside ChatGPT, take it out, and then be able to use that across different applications. So this is something that we're rolling out right now. And we actually just launched our app this week. So I've got a link for that too if you want to try that out. And really the vision here, so users connect their own storage and their own compute environment, right? It's really to give like full sovereignty over your data so that you're able to use it however you want, whether it is in a financialized use case, like choosing to rent your data or kind of train AI models with it, or just choosing to use it to kind of provide context to different AI applications across the internet. Yeah, kind of zooming back out, I think that the world we live in, I think there's a lot of analogies to kind of serfdom, right? And kind of living under this data serfdom. And if you look at the times when farmers didn't own their land, I think one really important fact is that actually productivity was a lot worse, right? And I think often people associate data ownership with potentially people who don't want to train AI or don't want to make technology better. But one important takeaway is that if you give users ownership of their data, they can create much better data and therefore create much better AI, right? And that's the same thing that's played out in agriculture, where if you give farmers ownership of their land, they're actually generally much more productive in that land. And so, yeah, these are some of the links. If you want to try out the app, here's the link. There's a code because it's invite only right now. If you want to explore some of the data sets on the network, those are available on the playground. And then we also have a Discord if you want to dive into building something specific on the network. It's been such a pleasure to get to build with the Flower AI team. So it's great to be here. But yeah, that's everything I have.
Great talk. Any questions for Anna? Oh, one in the back right there, gentleman there.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It was awesome. So that data you pull from ChatGPT, but can you pull that from the others and just sync with ChatGPT, for example, or other AI models, and then it's going to be saved back to your local device, so it's not going to be stored in OpenAI anymore?
Yeah, so I guess kind of the two questions. One is like, where is the data stored? Right. So you connect your own storage. By default, we default to just you connecting your own Google Drive. You can also connect you can store it on your local device, but there can be uptime issues where you should just make sure it's always online. But yeah, you connect your own storage. And then in terms of deleting the data from the platform, what we've seen to date is that people still want to keep their data in a given platform, right? Of you take your Spotify data out, you're like, I still kind of want to use Spotify. I think at some point we could see people doing that mass deletion, but right now it's just taking the copy out. Yeah.
So there's no sync process right now that just deletes it and just moves it up?
Yeah, there is a seamless process in the app actually, which is it has taken a ton of work to get working, where you just put your credentials in and it goes and grabs all your data for you. Awesome. And the companies intentionally make that very hard to do. With the Spotify one in particular, that team, it took them 6 months to launch, where they would basically build the integration and then Spotify would change something on their side. And they can't legally block you from doing it, but they can make it very inconvenient. So I think also better data regulation will help with that too.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks so much.